my name is Matt Whitman, and I have apparently become a bit of a fuss bucket about writing, which is weird because I'm not even that good of a writer myself. I don't think I could do better necessarily than the people who write the TV shows and the movies, but I know what not good is when I see it. In the last few years, I keep seeing this thing where it's like somebody came into a good script and was like, I want something to happen here that I like. And it just destroys a character arc with one stupid little unnecessary decision or throwaway line. And that happened to me last night. I was so bummed. I took my family to Fly Me to the Moon. It is a lovely, nice little show that overstays its welcome by about 45 minutes, but it's a fun show. There's NASA moon landing stuff in there, and it stirred my blood. Big dreams, ambitious accomplishments. There's a lot of cool things in the movie. The performances are solid, and really, it was shockingly nice. I got about 80% of the way through the thing, and I'm like, why is this PG-13? And then Woody Harrelson drops a casual F-bomb. I'm like, oh, there we go. They wanted that PG-13 rating so that it would, maybe they thought it would do better or play better at the box office. So they just burned an F-bomb. They're like, ha ha ha, F-word. Now it's PG-13. Look at what we did. It's scandalous, but it's a sweet movie, and it really is pretty harmless. But there's a character, and I don't want to ruin it for you, who is a strong character with a strong motive, a strong moral compass that guides this character's decision-making. This character has been through a thing, a very difficult, life-defining thing, the kind of thing that you carry with you forever. And I was really enjoying the character, and I was really enjoying this character's interplay with another prominent character who comes at the world very differently. I'm trying to be vague because I think you might enjoy the movie. But somebody got their hands on the script, and in just one moment, they butchered this individual's character by having them say something they would never say and do something they would never do in light of their character. And at first, I rolled my eyes. I was kind of frustrated. I was like, dang it, I wanted to love this movie. And now I'm not going to love this movie. I'm just going to casually like it. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? Writing is hard. And good writing is more the exception than anything. And remembering everything that you have to pay off and making it symmetrical and making it work, I mean, this is a difficult thing, and it's why the stuff that stands the test of time that's just great and beautiful and amazing really stands out and really resonates with us. And then after the movie, I came home and I was reading Nehemiah chapter 12 because we talk about Nehemiah every day. And I was looking at something that is a great payoff, and I just had this contrast in my head between a movie that was, it was okay, could have been great. They missed on a few things, or it could have been great. And this book of Nehemiah, which is just great and pays off everything. And the cool thing about Nehemiah is that it doesn't just pay off stuff from Nehemiah. It pays off stuff from this whole Old Testament story that as a reader, you go through and maybe a little bit, you're like, oh, I don't know how to feel. I don't know what to do with all of this. How could there ever be resolution? And spoiler alert, you're meant to feel that because the whole thing is meant to say we tried everything and the human problem can't be solved by any of these things. It's going to take an intervention of God, a complete breaking of all of the normal rules of justice as we understand them in order to solve the human problem. It's meant to put, it's the whole Jesus thing on a T so that when you turn the page to the New Testament, it all clicks for you. You're like, oh my goodness, this makes the most sense of anything that I've ever read anywhere. I mean, that's the great grand payoff of all the payoffs and all of the things that have ever been written ever is the Old Testament being paid off by Jesus. So acknowledging that, it still feels coming out of the Old Testament as we get to the end of it here, like, there's a lot of loose ends, and how does this work? And even though Nehemiah can't solve all the tension, and even though Nehemiah doesn't solve the human problem, there is at least narrative payoff and completion to a whole bunch of earlier things that happened. And we're getting so much of that here in Nehemiah 12 with this rededication of the wall thing. It's great, right? We talked about the payoff of the walls of Jericho falling down. We came into this land as nomads, former slaves, and through the power of our God, demonstrating that this isn't just another regional squabble, but rather that this is the will of God to do this with this area and to establish his people in this area. The walls came tumbling down only with marching and the sounds of trumpet. Okay, well, that pays off in Nehemiah walking around the walls here with all the music and everything. And then in Joshua 8, we get the ceremony of the renewal of the covenant with the call and response from each side of the valley near Shechem with Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, and boom, that pays off with the two choirs circling around and everybody in this now man-made amphitheater that's kind of reminiscent of the natural amphitheater of Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. It's so good. It's so rich. But there's more here that pays off, and it's a little bit subtle. And okay, at some point here, I just got to read you these lists of names. I'm not going to do it yet. Maybe we'll get that in at the end. We got to read every word of the Bible as we're going through these books. But let me get to the stuff that we've been talking about here. So the two choirs are going around the walls, and they're both snaking their way up to the temple. They're making the ascent to the city of David, where the temple is at, and everybody's watching, and the music is resonating in their chests, and it's beautiful and amazing, and everybody's excited and celebrating, and there's joy everywhere. And they all get up there, and they all get situated, and there's Nehemiah, and there's Ezra, and then I'm going to start in verse 40. The two choirs that gave thanks then took their places in the house of God. So did I, Nehemiah, together with half the officials, as well as the priests, Eliakim, Maaseiah, Miniamin, Micaiah, Elionai, Zechariah, and Hananiah with their trumpets, and also Maaseiah, Shemaiah, Eleazar, Uzai, Jehohanan, Melchijah, Elam, and Ezer. The choirs sang under the direction of Jezrahiah, and on that day they offered great sacrifices, rejoicing because God had given them great joy. The women and children also rejoiced. The sound of rejoicing in Jerusalem could be heard far away. It's a subtle payoff, but it's here, all the way back in Joshua chapter 8 that we were looking at a couple of days ago. Oh, I'm not Bible drilling well. This is going poorly. It's humiliating. Okay, there we go. Joshua chapter 8. When the people all line up, it isn't just the dudes and the head of the households. It says here at the end of Joshua 8, back at the renewal of the covenant ceremony between Ebal and Gerizim, roughly 1,000 years before the stuff we're looking at here, maybe 800 years. It says in verse 35, there was not a word of all that Moses had commanded that Joshua did not read to the whole assembly of Israel, including the women and children and to the aliens who lived among them. That was a very progressive thing in the Iron Age, Bronze Age world to even mention that the women and the children were there. Even more so to mention that the outsiders, the foreigners, the aliens who were a part of this thing, to even bring them up is very unusual, but it nods toward what we see fulfilled and paid off more completely as the Old Testament goes along and into the New Testament, as Jesus breaks down all kinds of these social barriers, all the way to the point where eventually we're told that, there's not Greek nor free or circumcised or uncircumcised or male nor female. All of those boundaries and social barriers are all covered over in the new family of faith, and everybody is one in Christ.
Going to have to hit pause here. This is Jeff, and I'm interrupting Matt's episode because he sent me a file that really is long enough to be 2 episodes. And so we're cutting it right here because this is basically the halfway point. He'll pick up the second half in the next episode and continue on this story of comparing Fly Me to the Moon with Nehemiah's ability to pick up and pay off all these great storylines. I'm also interrupting because I can. And what would be classier than a guy jumping in and pirating somebody else's podcast to promote his own stuff? But that's what I'm going to do, because this Monday, July 22nd, is the formal digital release of A Simple Life by Rooktown, which is the song that you've been hearing at the beginning of almost every episode here in the Nehemiah season. There is a full version of it that will be available next Monday on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, wherever it is that you get your podcast and music fun. I'd really appreciate it if you would give that a listen on Monday or any time thereafter. There's a second song that is being released with that called Bonus Episode. Until next time, I'm Jeff. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.